Welcome back to Shifting to Solids. Today we're going to be talking about the chamfer tool, but before we dive in, I want to introduce my awesome host for the Teen CAD Tournament, the host to my co-host, TooTallToby. He's known for his energy and CAD expertise, and he's the perfect person to bring this event to life. So let's get ready for an epic competition. Toby, take it away.
Hey, what's up everybody? TooTallToby here, and welcome to 2025. Man, it's hard to believe that we are already in the new year. It feels like last year just completely blew by. But it's good to be here. I hope you're all having a happy new year so far. And it's also hard to believe that we are just over 1 week away from our very first high school CAD vs. CAD speed modeling tournament. This is a very special event that was put together by Corey Mesa, aka Mesa Makes, an old friend of the channel. And Corey reached out to us and said, hey, I'm a high school instructor at La Grande High School in La Grande, California, and I've got 8 Onshape wizards who want to compete in a CAD vs. CAD tournament. And we said, Corey, let's make this happen. And so he and I have been working together, and we have come up with next Friday at 1 p.m. as the kickoff date for our live streaming events. We're going to be live streaming right here on this channel, and we're going to watch these CAD vs. CAD showdowns.
Thanks, Toby. I'm pumped to be co-hosting this tournament with you, and I know it's going to be an epic showdown. Now, before we dive into this competition, let's take a quick look at that tool that'll definitely come in handy for those CAD designs that these kiddos will be drawing, the chamfer tool. Let's go ahead and break it down. So if you guys are just joining, we'll take a look up at the top. You know, like always, we're going to be drawing a sketch. So let's click our top plane. We'll hold Shift and S, N to normalize, and P to hide those planes. We're going to start with some simple geometry. I believe it was in our pattern tool when I showed you how to do all the different types of shapes when we did the polygons. We're going to be doing something similar to that today. But for starters, let's draw a circle. We'll start it, and it needs to be 3.5 inches in diameter on that origin. We're going to switch to an inscribed polygon, and these dimensions don't really matter. I just want to show you a specific size that matches across all 5 of these shapes. So if you pick 5 as your dimension, that's fine as long as you're consistent across the board. This isn't a part we're actually going to make. We're just using this to show some examples of how this chamfer tool works. So we got our circle. We're going to draw next. I know I could draw a rectangle using the rectangle tool, but I want you guys to get in the habit of practicing these other features that we have that Onshape has available. And this repetition is going to help with that. So again, a diameter of 3.5. Skip over a little bit. Give yourself some space. We're going to do pentagon with the same dimension of 3.5. We're going to do another one that needs to be a hexagon. So we should have a 4-sided shape, a 5-sided shape, and a 6-sided shape. So 3.5 again. And then off to the side of that, we're just going to draw another circle. And this one can be bigger than the other things. It's okay if you make that 3.5 as well, but I'm going to need a rectangle, a center point rectangle based off of that with enough gap. So let's we'll make it 8 by 8. And let's move those a little closer. There we go. So this is what we're dealing with today. We're just going to draw some 2D shapes, and real quick way to turn those 3D is the letter or the button Shift and E, and it'll auto select everything. And it's exactly how I want those selected. That's the reason we drew this way. Your extrude will default to 1 inch in depth, and that's what we want today. So go ahead and click OK. Make sure you're on solid and new. And by doing so, you will see that it'll color code every single piece a different color, so it knows that it's a different type of material. Okay. So now if you follow me up to the top, now that we have our basic geometry figured out, we've talked about the fillet tool. Today we're going to be talking about chamfer. And if you look at that and we hover over, a chamfer creates a beveled edge or face. You can specify the measurement type. You can do an offset or tangent, and the chamfer type equal to distance or distance and angle. Individual edges can be overridden to change the direction. Basically what we're going to do, I look at this as we're going to cut some corners, and instead of rounding them like we do with a fillet, we're just going to literally like shear it off. If you guys use any ironworkers, or the Piranha is what we call it because it's the brand name, the one we own, you've probably used the notcher on the backside, and that's exactly what the notcher is going to do. It's going to kind of chamfer some edges, cut it at a corner, but it's going to do that kind of heavy lifting for you. So I'm going to go back to my first sketch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a triangle in this corner. I'm just going to go from here to here, and I'm going to give it a dimension from this point to here. I want to be 0.5, and same thing here, from here to here, that needs to be 0.5. And you'll see why in just a second. We'll click OK. We'll go back to my extrude, and you'll see that if I click this shape now, we'll go and pick all these other ones as well, and I deselect that corner, I now have an edge that is chamfered without using the chamfer tool. Yes, some of you guys are coming from old school drafting where you would draw everything as much as you can in a 2D practice, in a 2D print, and then you would extrude it up, or you're coming from different programs where you kind of had to think 3D in a 2D environment. I know when I used to do stuff on Plasma Cam, it was we'd do a lot of like things that would unfold, and we had to pre-do it before we would do that kind of stuff. So that's how you would do a chamfer without the chamfer tool. There isn't a 2D chamfer tool, so that's how you have to go about doing it. But we're here today to talk about the 3D chamfer tool. So we're going to click chamfer, and you'll see this menu will pop up, and it's asking you entities to chamfer. So it says select edges or faces to chamfer. So I'm going to start with edges. Pretty simple. I click the edge of that circle, and it's going to chamfer. It's going to put a bevel, essentially, on that top. So it's going to cut away, okay? Now, I was messing with this earlier. So if you looked up here, it's 0.2. It usually defaults to 0.5. So we'll type that in. And it's going to be an angle of 45. So we'll pop back out. But you'll see if I click, I can click one face. The reason why it clicked the whole circle is because there's not really an edge. The circle is the whole edge. But I can pick maybe just these two sides. I want a bevel. If I pick, we'll undo those. If I know I want to bevel all four sides, I can just click the top, and it'll select all four at the same time. So same thing here. I can go pick the tops of all of these. Now, what's kind of cool here is I'm going to do just this corner, and you'll see if we look from the top view, the geometry that I did up here, turn my sketch back on, and the chamfer that we just did down here is exactly the same because I gave it that same parameter of 0.5, right? That's using the distance and angle type. If I were to do equal distance, it would do the same thing because we did 0.5 and 0.5. But I could do two distances, and that's kind of cool too. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, this is the one that I'm working on right now. And this is the one that we did previously in geometry. So maybe I want it to go 0.5 one direction and 0.125 the other. So if we zoom in now here, I'm left with kind of like an oblong shear, and maybe that's what you want, okay? But for what we're doing right now, we'll go equal distance, or actually we'll go distance and angle, and we'll let it do its thing. So I can go and pick all of these corners up here, all of these corners, and now I can kind of do that. The reason I didn't click the face on this top one is because I want to show you something else. Why would I ever want to chamfer some things? If we go back to my first circle, my first shape, we'll select OK. I see something that looks to me like half of a pulley. If I were to take this, we'll do this real quick, mirror this over this plane. Now I'm making some sort of like a pulley for a V groove or a V belt, some sort of groove belt. Real quick, I could add some holes to then make this a pulley if I'm going to, put this on a car for an alternator or starter or whatever. But that's an outside hole. What we're talking is inside hole. So why would I ever want to do this? Well, if I chamfer, or we'll go back to the one we already selected, and I select this inside, now I have a countersink, essentially. Well, some of you guys are already yelling at me and like, oh, well, there's a hole tool. Yeah, you're right, there is. But if you are the type that likes to do everything and you want to see in your timeline, in your feature tree, that I've put the chamfer, I've done this, it's like a checklist for you, this is how you would go about doing it. So let's unselect that. We'll add it in its own. So we could call this chamfer, I could call chamfer countersink chamfer, and then pick just my circle. I could, maybe it needs to be a 0.25, but it needs to be at a 15.735 degree angle. We'll zoom in and it'll do it for me. So if you have certain valve seats, maybe you're making something like that, marking something up for an engine. If you have specific angles for whatever you might be making, this is how you can go about doing that. And you'll see if I say, okay, that is my countersink chamfer. So if I never needed to refer back to it and I'm like, oh, you know what? That wasn't supposed to be 15 degrees. That was supposed to be 25.735. I can go back and edit it and change it accordingly, right? If you're big on the variables, you can use that for the variables. There's a million ways you can use this tool, but that's pretty much what chamfer will do. Again, why would you use this? I was toying around with some stuff earlier. Here is a drawing of essentially what a seatbelt buckle looks like. Very, very primitive. We'll shut those planes off so we can see it a little bit better. Move some stuff out of the way. If you guys want to recreate this, you can. It's not perfect geometry. I kind of copied a sketch I saw online. So we'll let you sit there for a second. Grab a screenshot of that if you want to try to replicate this. But essentially from here, what I would do is extrude, select this face. We'll make this like 1/2 inch. And you'll see now I have a bunch of faces to play with. So as I'm doing this chamfer tool, if I click this whole face, it doesn't like that because this doesn't match what's going on. I typically like doing the equal distance. Something I found out is if you're in this text box for your distance, yeah, I can keep typing in a bunch of stuff, but if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can hover over it and scroll down or scroll up to get more values or less values depending on which way you go with that scroll wheel. So if you're making something that dimensions aren't really all there and you're chamfering or you're doing fillets for like aesthetic purposes, and it's not really like, oh, it has to fit up exactly. The overall geometry is there, but these fillets and these chamfers are there for aesthetic purposes. You can use this, and I really like it. I kind of start with like 0.125 and then go through and manipulate as I need to. So if I wanted to put a full round all the way around this whole deal and let it chamfer, I could also pick the bottom face. It'll round it that way. I could pick all my sides. I could also just select the whole shape and you'll see it'll build a huge deal here and we'll say okay, but every face starts to get rounded all the way down into the hole, which might not be what you need, but it's a way to start something. I'm looking at this drawing right here and I see all these polygons. It reminds me of like early like PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 graphics where everything was super blocky polygons, but essentially this is what you're able to do. So we'll jump back into that other part studio really quick and I'll show you guys one last thing. We'll go back to our first chamfer. Just remember that as you do this, you have all these options. So again, I'm going to deselect all of these. We'll say, let's delete that countersink. Come back here. And I'm only going to chamfer my square and my square will use equal distance. So if we look here, equal distance of 0.5, you'll see that that's equal distance all the way across. I'm going to do another chamfer, and I'm going to do it on this pentagon, but instead of equal distance, I'm going to pick the two distances to show you again. So we'll click this top face, and we'll kind of go from a side view here of this piece. Distance, we'll say 0.5 there, and we'll say 0.25 on my second distance. So if I can get myself aligned, there we go. You'll see that it's cutting. If I were to measure from this point to this point, that would be 0.25, and from this point to this point would be 0.5. You can do that. Again, I can use the scroll wheel and manipulate however much I want to. One thing to notice, you can go to the center. So maybe if this is a quicker way to make a pyramid, instead of doing like the loft tool, whatever works for you. I'm not going to tell you there's a right way or a wrong way, but just play with the designs. It's kind of cool. I was doing this earlier and thought this might be a really cool way to make a fire pit fairly quickly. So Felipe, Mr. Barrientos, I know we were talking, this might be an easy option for you. I still am going to make that video on how to make that deal for you, but this might be a cool option too. So remember the chamfer two distances. We'll do another chamfer on this last hexagon face, and that one will do distance and angle. So again, I'll make it a distance of 1, and the angle needs to be 15 degrees. So you can do, let's make this 0.75, right? It's all about the depth and the angle. So maybe you know an angle, but you don't have the exact measurement. I know in our shop we use protractors, and it's easier for my kids to measure up where the angle starts to, and then add that angle on after, add that distance and that angle. So distance and angle is the way this would work. So we'll say okay, and you'll see my square is an equal distance. My hexagon, or my pentagon, sorry, is a 2 distance, so 2 different values, and my hexagon is my distance and my angle. So that's how that chamfer tool works. Again, if you need any help with that, if we click on that guy, unfortunately, there is no shortcut tool. But something I noticed, Toby does it a lot, and I'm big on shortcut keys. But if you press the letter S, you can bring up this shortcut key menu, and you can add whatever you want. And if you look, chamfer by default is already on there. I don't really like using this I run my Onshape in stock settings, essentially, if you think about it that way. And I try to memorize the shortcut keys because I'm teaching kids how to use it. And I don't want them to see something on my screen that's different than what's on their screen. Later on, if they want to make their own shortcuts for this quick pop-up menu, that works too. Again, the way you find that is you press the letter S and then just click whatever shape you want. If you right click on it, you can click customize. It's going to take you into your account settings. You can add whatever you want. So that's going to do it for us today. Again, be sure to check out that tournament. I'm really, really excited. Most of you guys are going back to school already. This coming up when this video comes out on Monday. But Friday, January 10th, we will be rocking and rolling, and the kids are going to be getting after it. So if you need some sub plans, post the video and watch. We'll be going from 10 a.m. Pacific time till about noon-ish. Should be however long the kids take to get the drawings done, but it'll be a good time. If you have been in one of my classes, whether at Golden Valley, LeGrand, whatever, and you're still watching, say hi in the chat. If you are a teacher and your kids are watching, let me know. I'll have my headset on that day talking, and me and Toby are going to be commentating, talking about what's going on with these kids and how they're getting these drawings done. So thanks again for all the support. Like, comment, subscribe down at the bottom, and ask any questions you might have in that Google form in the description. I'll see you guys later.